Okay, we are live. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the September 24th Litchfield Budget Committee meeting. We'll get started here with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, do we have any reviews or additions or changes to tonight's agenda from anybody on the committee? No? I have one under town business. Obviously tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the budgeting process that's forthcoming here starting next week. I'd like to add just an item for budget review process underneath town business. We'll go through the Google sheet that Town Administrator Brown sent across, as well as my lovely Excel file that most of you are familiar with. So we'll take you through that. All right, without any reviews or additions or anybody else, we'll move forward to correspondence. I do have several correspondence to read off to the committee this evening. And for the minutes, we have 9-3, in which we received the resignation of Miss Jennifer Burke. We are very saddened to hear of this news and this resignation, but we thank Jen certainly for her longstanding service on the Budget Committee and wish her nothing but the best. On September 8th, we had legal guidance and town administrator guidance for filling the open vacancy on our committee. Also on September 8th, per our Budget Committee bylaws, as chair, I reached out to the next highest voter at our March election, which is Mr. Scott Taylor. Scott does join us this evening, and we'll go through momentarily here on our agenda and talk to Scott. We also had, with the public notice that went out, we had Mr. Jeff Town interested in the resignation or in the seat, and he also responded to me via email on September 22nd. Mr. Derek Barca also expressed interest, and he's with us this evening. Also on September 22nd, we have the business administrator report that was distributed from Michelle that was reported to the school board at their last meeting. Also on September 22nd, I circulated the 2017 tax cap article. I feel like there's going to be a lot of discussion on tax cap and very relevant for those that joined the NHMA budget workshop today. They went into great detail about tax cap. So I know that's fresh in our minds anyways. And then just today, actually just late this afternoon, Town Administrator Brown sent out the preliminary Google sheet with the budget details, which we'll also talk a little bit about tonight in preparation for next week. Any other correspondence to add this evening? No? Okay. So we also have the August 27th, 2020 minutes. Did everyone have a chance to review those minutes? Yes?
Yes.
Questions, comments, modifications? I'll entertain a motion.
So made. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of August 27th, 2020.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. A motion by Ms. Douglas, a second by Ms. Forty. Discussion.
None. Looked good.
Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Sun.
Yes.
Ms. Douglas.
Yes.
I am a yes. Mr. Leary.
Yes.
Mr. Hodgkins. Ms. Harrison.
Abstain.
Abstain. Okay, thank you. We have on the line, we have Ms. Forty.
Yes.
Yes. And Mr. Hayes.
Yes.
Okay, so the motion passes 8-0-1, if I did that right.
7. Yeah. Oh, we don't have 9 anymore.
I'm sorry, 7-0-1.
That's why we have the next item on the list.
Yep, 7-0-1. There's too many people on this committee.
I did lots of math today, so I like kind of like, oh, that doesn't add up right.
It's not as easy as the 5-0 calls that you guys have at the Board of Selectmen. All right, next up on our agenda, we have obviously the resignation of a Budget Committee member, Ms. Jen Burke, as mentioned a moment ago. And then we also have candidate interviews. So as expressed, I'm very grateful that we have 3 willing citizens of our town that reached out and expressed interest in this position. Again, we have Mr. Scott Taylor. We have certainly Mr. Jeff Town, as well as Mr. Derek Barca with us this evening. So with that, I know each of those gentlemen did circulate to the committee an email. They expressed their interest in the position. Let me turn it over to Mr. Scott Taylor to get us started. You were the first email that we received. And if you could just, tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll just have a little bit of a discussion amongst the committee.
That sounds great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the rest of the committee. Do appreciate the opportunity to be able to reapply to fill this particular opening. As most of you know, I did run during the March campaign, took part in the roundtable discussions, mentioned many times around the Facebook page that I put together to be able to lay out my viewpoint to the voters. As the chairman had mentioned, I am the next highest vote getter. Still very, very interested in this particular position and continuing the same discussion points that I talked about during the roundtable discussion, which is opening up more conversation via questions within the town around even if we have to spend on something, are we doing things the right way? And through that type of questioning process, we'll probably uncover additional options that people did not think of and could end up being more budget friendly than the current status quo. So again, I thank you very much, everybody. Certainly the voters heard from me quite a bit during the election season. I'll open it up to any questions that anybody on the committee has for me.
Thank you, Scott. So questions from the committee?
I do.
Please, Mr. Hodgkins.
How do you feel about town taxes? Are they too high, too low?
I would say that at this point, as I've mentioned on the Facebook page, I do see a troubling climb as far as year-over-year increases, and I think those types of things need to be questioned to see, which ones are mandated. If there are things that are mandated, I would like to actually go ahead and dig into why someone interprets it as mandated to ensure that that interpretation is correct. But certainly, Brian, from my standpoint, I would like to see some checks and balances based on that chart that I put together over the last 10 years.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Mr. Sun.
Sorry, go ahead.
Scott, this is John David's son. Thanks for joining us tonight. My understanding is this position is appointed by us until the March election. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So, Scott, do you have intention of running after March?
Absolutely, I do. Matter of fact, I still have the signs from last year sitting in the basement ready to be dusted off, and I will be at Town Hall in January to make sure that my application is in on time.
Great. Thank you.
Welcome.
Ms. Harrison,
That was I had the same question.
you had the same question.
Great
Okay. How about Ms. Forty or Mr. Hayes?
Hi, Mr. Taylor. Thank you for joining us. Can you talk a little bit about any specific budgeting experience that you might have? It's okay if you don't. Many of us didn't before we started, but I was just, if you could sum that up real quick, or what particular do you feel you can contribute to the committee? And what do you think that you'll get out of being on the committee?
Sure. Thank you very much for the question. So in terms of budgeting experience, certainly from my current role and past roles as far as my full-time job, handling P&L, things of that nature, making sure that, travel budget, headcount budget, things of that nature are in order. As far as in the town, I was part of a 3-person team that went ahead and started Litchfield Lacrosse. We started that, bootstrapped it right from the beginning. Obviously, the criticality of good budgeting at that point in order to make that particular program take off. And now we're, 10 plus years into it, and it's a thriving sport within the town of Litchfield. I started off as the vice president doing a lot of the budgeting, and then transitioned over to the treasurer and continued to follow up on that particular role. So what I'm looking to get out of this committee is just a better understanding of the way things work. And like I said, the ability to be able to ask questions and challenge certain mindsets around ways that we need to go ahead and spend, so that way the voters feel like folks have done their due diligence before they receive their tax bill, that, people are actually spending money in the areas that make the most sense and also are necessary and not, frivolous.
Thank you. Mr. Hayes? No?
Is he muted?
think so.
I don't, unless he's muted on his own personal line, I don't think he's muted through the WebEx. Okay. Final call. Any other questions for Mr. Taylor? All right. Next up, Mr. Town. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. So maybe just share a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in the Budget Committee, please.
Okay, I think you probably all read the short resume that I sent around. I don't need to repeat all that. But I've been involved with the church in Londonderry for 37 years, with the Boy Scouts in town for quite a few years as well. And I've got a little bit more time on my hands, and I've never really been involved in the running of the town. I've got a little bit more time now, and it seemed like a good time to get back to the town in that way.
Thank you very much. So committee, any questions for Mr. Town?
Sure.
Mr. Hodgkins, please.
Pretty much the same thing. Do you think the town taxes are too high? And would you have any problem saying no to the town and to the school?
So I think the town taxes right now are closer to too high than too low. I don't think it's really a question of are they an absolute too high or too low, but are we spending appropriate amounts of money on appropriate things? And that includes a lot of different dimensions, what the townspeople can afford. Different people have different economic circumstances, and what we need to run a town that's, the schools in particular, they have to be safe, they have to provide good education, and they have to be, what people can afford. And the town side of the budget does it provide the quality of life that the townspeople want at a price that they are willing to spend and can afford?
Thank you.
Want to ask or do you want me to ask?
Go ahead.
Ms. Harrison.
Same question as that JD asked Scott. Do you plan to run in March if you're not appointed this evening?
I haven't made a decision about that one way or another. This is my first experience with the budget committee. So I don't know.
We'll
That's
have to
fair.
go easy to persuade him, right?
I know.
How about any questions on the line? Ms. Forty or Mr. Hayes?
Hi, Mr. Town. Thank you for joining us. I'm curious if you have watched any of the available budget committee sessions on YouTube, or have done any research about budget law to try to prepare yourself, or is it, is there something specific about this particular committee that interests you, or is it just general, like wanting to get back to the town at this time?
Yeah, so I watched one budget committee meeting on YouTube just out of curiosity. I haven't done any research on budget law. My most recent work on the church was a part of the finance committee for a few years, and then as chairman of the finance committee. So this seemed like a reasonable first step into town politics. And I saw the opportunity, the opening was there.
Thank you. Mr. Hayes?
I have one question that I
Yeah,
should have asked
I'm
to.
on mute. Every time I get off, it seems to take a while, but I do not have any questions at this time.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
So the only question I would have of Mr. Town that if it's not too much trouble, I'd like to go back and ask Mr. Taylor. Commitment wise, do we recognize that budget committee season is taking off and that commitments will be pretty much Thursdays from here on until almost mid-January? Are we prepared? Can your schedules accommodate that kind of a commitment?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. And I'm sorry, Mr. Taylor, I didn't think to ask you. Same question to you.
Yes, as long as there isn't any unexpected work travel that would be required, then yes, I already have the calendar marked off.
Excellent. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, and in full disclosure, I spoke to Mr. Town, Mr. Taylor, Mr. Barker as well. Mr. Barker is obviously very familiar with our process. Mr. Town and Mr. Taylor are, very well aware of our budget cycle, really picking up actually starting this week and for the foreseeable
Excellent.
future.
I just remember our last nomination that said he could make it, and then we never
Yeah.
saw again.
That's a good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Town? All right. Thank you again, Mr. Town. Mr. Barker, over to you.
So, hey everyone. So my name is Derek Barker. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at a company called Silvertech headquartered out of Manchester. My wife Becky and I have been in Litchfield for a little over 15 years. We have 2 kids in the school district. My daughter's a sophomore at Campbell High. My son's an 8th grader at LMS. Like I mentioned, been here for about 15 years. We love the community. We love giving back. I think what we like most about it is that small town feel. People getting involved, whether it's through the churches or coaching sports, getting involved in local volunteerism, in your committees, local politics, things like that. Myself, I've coached soccer for about 10 years, volunteered within the schools, and then was obviously on the school board for 2 terms. From around 2012 to 2018. As part of that, I was on 2 collective bargaining agreement teams where we negotiated 2 contracts. Passed both of them. I'll also point out they were both far less than the one we just passed if you want to talk about fiscal responsibility. And then I was also the school board rep to the budget committee. So I do have that experience going through the budgets, understanding how the processes work. I can hit the ground running on day one. To answer one of the questions, I know it's coming. I do not plan to run in March. I'm just offering my services and experience to kind of get you through this period of time until the election and the voters can vote someone to permanently take that seat.
Thank you. Yeah. And if you've watched in years past where we've had, kind of an 8-member committee or composition of a committee, it's not uncommon for us to have tie votes, which result in a fail, right? Or not recommended. And so filling this seat is critical in terms of breaking the deadlock in certain circumstances and votes. So any questions from Mr. Barca?
I'll put mine on the record just because I know you answered it, but I want to make it clear that I've asked all of them the time commitment for Thursdays. And the occasional Tuesday, I believe. So excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
He answered my question.
Do you want to
Mr.
ask
Hodgkins?
To me, it's pretty much a yes or no question. Do you think the taxes are too high in this town? And then would you say yes, or do you have a problem with telling either the town or the school no to their budgets?
Yeah, good question. I guess I don't think it's as easy as a yes or no. It's obviously complicated. Our tax is high, yes. Is it tough for Litchfield specifically because we don't have commercial properties, we don't have industrial properties. All of the taxes are borne by homeowners, unfortunately. I think Litchfield does a good job of being creative. As Mr. Taylor pointed out, we bootstrap lots of things, try and save costs and things like that. To your other question, do I have a problem saying no? No, I don't. And to kind of take that a step further, if you look at my time on the school board, I was obviously a very strong supporter of the schools. I think anyone that followed me at the time knew that. I also know that this is a different role. As a school board member, my role was to support the schools, support the students, and then balance those needs with what the taxpayers can afford. This is a different role. This is, being a check and balance to those governing bodies, really looking at those line items, looking at, historical trends and things like that, and asking the tough questions, and maybe not voting necessarily how you feel, but how you think the town wants you to vote as their checks and balances.
Any follow-ups? No? Ms. Forty? Mr. Hayes? No?
No questions at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. And so with that, the tax rate, it actually came up, it's an interesting point, right? It came up last night at the Capital Improvement Planning Committee, and we actually did some research. Mr. Weber, I thank him for that. He looked it up based upon a lot of the public input, and we're 112 out of 260 in terms of tax rate, tax impact for all towns in New
So
Hampshire.
right in the middle.
We're right in the middle. Yeah, we're right in the middle. All right, that's based on 2019 data. So in terms of next steps, I know it's been kind of a long-standing process of the committee to hear information and to vote on it at our next meeting. It is the entire will of the committee, whether you'd like to do that this evening and make a vote next week for a recommendation to appoint somebody to the committee, or we can certainly tackle it tonight.
I'm prepared to make a nomination, but it'd be up to the committee as to whether or not they
I
will.
would support that too. That way whoever's appointed has a week to go through at least the town budget, since we
I agree
have it
with that.
already, and be prepared for our next meeting.
Okay,
I think
good
that
with
makes
that too.
sense.
that's good. Yes. Ms. Forty, Mr. Hayes, you okay with that too?
I agree.
Okay, well, I'll entertain a motion.
I would like,
Oh.
I would like to wait until next week so that we have time to, think about the three candidates.
Okay. So with that, Mr. Hayes, I do believe the majority is everyone would like to vote this evening.
Do you want to take a vote
Want to
on
take a
that?
vote
So we
on
have-
whether we should
Probably
vote?
not a bad idea.
Yeah.
I make a
So-
motion to make a nomination tonight.
Second. I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion by Ms. Douglas, a second by Ms. Harrison. Discussion. And this motion, again, is to make a vote tonight to appoint a representative to fill the seat.
So for me, the nomination was not difficult. I appreciate everybody submitting their time, their information and their time and expressing their interest. However, we have not yet started budget season. We do have a candidate who obtained almost 500 votes in the last election who has submitted their name. That person has reached out to a lot of the voters, has had an opportunity to be vetted by the townspeople. And so for me, I would nominate that person regardless of whether I agree philosophically or not. I don't know all of the steps, but to me, that candidate has spoken to the people, there's been input, and I'm comfortable nominating that person, especially since we have not yet started deliberations of the budget, nor has it yet been presented. So that is why I am comfortable making a nomination tonight.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion?
Yeah, I'd rather wait the week myself, only because I'm not part of that face group book that Mr. Taylor talked about. So I didn't see any of the stuff he put
I think
out
he
there.
created his own Facebook page.
Yes.
It's not,
I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
So I would actually wouldn't mind just hearing what they had to say. But if Mr. Hayes wants some time, I'd more than happily give him time to do it.
okay. Further discussion?
I mean, all of the budget committee members did receive the messages from all three gentlemen. I know one was a little later than the others, but, so we have had some time. But I can see it. Point well taken.
Yeah, I hear what Mr. Hodgkin's saying, and I think I have a different slant on that just because I did read that information. Perhaps had I not, I might be in a different position. However, I do feel like moving forward tonight gives them an opportunity to be fully prepared for next week. If we do take a vote next week, that person's going to be jumping in cold, right? And perhaps that's not an issue. That's my only reason in wanting to move forward tonight.
Any further discussion before we move to vote?
Even if they're jumping in cold next week, we're just presenting the town budget next week. We're not voting on it, so they'll still have time to digest it. So, I mean, whatever the committee wants, I'm good with. So I'll go with the majority.
Okay. All right, so let's move to vote then. If there's no further discussion, we'll start with, we'll do a roll call vote. I think that's probably easiest in this case. Mr. Sun, we'll start with you.
And the motion is to move forward with a vote this evening to nominate tonight, correct?
To not, right, this isn't appointing, this is to move forward with, the process to appoint this evening.
Correct. Yes.
Yes, okay. Ms. Douglas?
Yes.
Yes, I am a yes as well.
Yes.
Mr. Leary? Mr. Hodgkins?
No.
Ms. Harrison? Yes. Ms. Forty?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
No.
Okay, the motion passes 6-0.
All right, so then I will make my nomination. And I appreciate the three gentlemen submitting their names. This is a big commitment, and I appreciate you being willing to step forward and fill the need for the community. And if your interest is truly whetted, there is an election coming up in March, but until that time, I would nominate Mr. Scott Taylor to fill the vacant seat.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to nominate and appoint Mr. Scott Taylor to fill the open seat on the Budget Committee. Discussion.
Is this how you usually do the election? Because normally don't you usually take how much hand count for each individual?
I think it's up to
That's
us
up.
to appoint.
Yeah.
Right?
In the past, we've appointed. So this is how we've done it in the past.
Yeah, I was involved 2 years ago when Andrew had
Okay.
resigned. It was this process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. It's
So-
fine with me. I was just asking.
So the reason I'm comfortable with it is because I believe that this candidate has been in front of the voters. People have had the opportunity to ask questions. Mr. Barca and Mr. Town are both wonderful gentlemen. But in this situation, people have had the opportunity to express express their concerns, talk to him, and express their support through voting. He was on the ballot. He did garner a large number of support. And to me, I believe that nominating him represents the will of the voters more so than having him somebody appointed by 5 members of a committee.
Yeah, I agree with Ms. Douglas. I had the unique opportunity to spend some time with Mr. Taylor on the night of the election as we were both waiting for votes to be counted. I had the opportunity to see his passion and his desire to be a part of this, and everything that I've heard him say, from the questions that he wants to ask and his desire to, truly ensure that we're being as fiscally responsible as we can. Even after all the votes were done, he was still saying the same thing to me as we were sitting there talking. And, I think Mr. Barca brings a wealth of experience that could be desirable. I also know I want to find someone that's going to be in it for the long haul. And I think, Mr. Taylor has expressed that desire to run again in March. And I think that weighing all of those factors, that's the way I lean as well.
I had a question. Would this appointment be good through March? So
Yes.
So
Until
Mr. Taylor
March.
would have to run again, or he would
Yes.
not have to run again?
He would have to run again in
There will be a
March.
special
Up to
2-year
the
term.
election.
Right.
Okay,
Correct.
So you'll have the standard 2 3-year terms as well as 1 2-year term.
got it. Okay.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to appoint Mr. Barca to the committee.
I'll second.
And thank you. So we have a motion and a second to amend the original motion, right? And the reason being, I think having Mr. Barca run or be willing to join our committee is very valuable to have an extra set of eyes, especially as we get into the school budgets. And going through a 150-page budget is very daunting. And to have that familiarity with that budget and to be able to have a critical eye and challenge it, I think is really a gap on this committee that will be welcomed. That's my thought.
Yeah, I had similar sentiments. I think someone able to jump in and hit the ground running next week is valuable. Mr. Barca has been involved in not just the school district, but in the town community for many, many years. And I think his experiences would be an asset. Also, thank you for that little slam on the teacher's contract, Derek. But I've heard feedback from Barca, and he's definitely not just willing to cut a blank check to the school district. So I think that's an important mindset to have too.
Yes, yeah.
Important
And
insight.
I will add as well that Mr. Barker has always had a critical eye on both the town and the school when
Yeah.
he was serving, certainly as a rep on the budget committee. Ms. Forty, Mr. Hayes?
What I'll say about this is that I think, given that we have, most of the time it's 2 and 3 terms, we sometimes miss out on people who maybe can't make that much of a commitment. But, to have a candidate come forward who has the experience and the passion and is saying, this is specifically what I can offer to be here through this entire budget cycle, I think that is also valuable.
I think it's unfortunate that we're discounting people for lack of experience because I think that everybody here was at one point not necessarily familiar with the budget and had to start somewhere. And this budget season has not yet started. So it's not like a candidate who's not been involved has really that far behind. And what better time to start than at the start of the budget season? So I appreciate Mr. Barker's passion and willingness to serve. But if we're going to bring someone up to speed, I said this the last time we nominated and it bit me, but I still stand by it. If we're going to nominate somebody, I think that we should have somebody, and if we're going to invest the time, somebody who's willing to take it further than just the next 6 months.
Fair point. Okay. So we'll do a roll call vote on the amended motion and then go back to the original motion, right? So this would be a vote with the vote standing, right, is to appoint Mr. Barca. Mr. Sun.
Nay.
Okay. Ms. Douglas?
No.
I am a yay. Mr. Leary? Mr. Hodgkins?
No.
Okay. Ms. Harrison?
Yes.
Yes. Ms. Forty?
No.
Okay. And Mr. Hayes?
No.
Excellent. So the motion fails. We'll now move back to the original motion, which is to appoint Mr. Taylor to the committee,
Unless there are any additional,
unless there are any additional amendments to the motions.
I'm willing to vote on this one, but I don't want to discount anybody's willingness to change it.
Okay. Mr. Sun?
Yes.
Yes.
I am a yes.
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Hodgkins?
Yeah.
Yes. Ms. Harrison?
Yes.
Yes. Ms. Forty?
Yes.
And Mr. Hayes?
I'm sorry, I could not pick up all that voting on right now.
Sure. So right now we're voting to appoint Mr. Taylor to the committee. So far, we have 7 yays, and you are the 8th person to vote.
You lose them?
I think we did.
We lost him?
Yeah.
Either way, the motion carries. We'll record it in the minutes as 7-0-0. Welcome, Mr. Taylor. And thank you, Mr. Barker and Mr. Town, for joining tonight. We appreciate your interest in the Budget Committee, and we hope to see you run in March. Thanks again for your interest.
Thank you all.
Thank you
Yes,
very much.
thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night, guys.
So now, just for point of reference, and I'm asking for the experience of those that have done this process before, does Mr. Taylor need to be sworn in by the town administrator?
In order to vote.
In order to
Town
vote,
clerk.
right?
In order to vote. He can sit in on the meeting, but he cannot, if there's any motions made, he cannot vote until he is sworn in.
Terry has to swear him in,
Got it.
I believe. The town
And you'll need
clerk.
to get a name tag.
I think he lost. I think he dropped.
We lose him. He quit already.
I know, right?
And then you need to reach out to Troy about name tags and getting those.
Yeah,
permits.
yeah. We had mentioned
Emails.
that at the start.
And emails and everything, yeah.
Troy,
Yep.
name tags. And a point for Mr. Taylor. Okay.
Yeah, I wish he didn't drop off so quick.
I know, right?
I hope that's not a portent of what's to come.
I know. Maybe if you give me a moment, I can send him a quick message here and see if he
Come back.
rejoins. I
I
think
can, yeah.
you can do that as
I can
well.
do it.
Yeah, thank you. Just I think that's fair if he's able to rejoin us and at least listen in tonight.
Yeah, we're gonna start, because we're presenting the
cruising
first
down
draft. of the
Yeah, because
budget.
we're going through preliminary budget, so it'd be great if
Be on his way.
right.
Maybe.
He could be driving.
We got an open spot.
Okay. Up,
I think it's Mr.
That's
Hayes.
Mr. Hayes.
Mr. Hayes. Okay, welcome back, sir.
Yes.
So moving forward in our agenda, we're going to get into town business. Mr. Leary, welcome and thank you for your updates tonight.
Did everybody get the, Troy sent out the preliminary budget for everyone?
I received
You
it.
guys all
Doesn't
get
mean
it?
I looked at it yet.
Yeah, I haven't looked at it
This
yet.
afternoon, yes.
Okay, good. So we'll have that to go forward for next week. We're still over the tax cap. We're working on it.
But just for my, because I haven't looked at it, like by how much.
We're going to review it in a few minutes.
Okay.
So we'll
But he just mentioned it now, so I was curious.
Last we knew was about 140,000.
Yeah, I think it's 136
Not 36?
Yeah.
Okay.
in that range.
So, but we have some things on the fire that might bring that down maybe if it works out. Other than that, marathon meetings.
Okay.
So I'll never complain about a budget committee meeting.
You all heard that? That's going to be in the minutes.
And I stand by it.
That's because they've been shorter than they have been when I first joined. We've been much more efficient and we talk
Thought
faster.
about bringing a pillow.
Mr. Cutter, he's rejoining here in just a minute.
Excellent.
Okay, great. So Mr. Taylor will rejoin us momentarily. That's excellent news. Thank you. Under RSA 3222, any review of expenses or any questions on expenses on the town side? No?
I did have a question. The last email included a list of all of the special funds and special fund balances. It was just something that kind of told me at the NHMA training today. Do we periodically go through and make sure that all of those funds are still necessary? There are some that I think have been sitting there with not a whole ton of money in them. But I was just curious about that or what the process. I know that it would have to, be a warrant article to dissolve a fund, but just curious. I guess it's kind of a short question.
They get reviewed every year. Troy goes through all of them with us.
Okay. I had a question on expenses. In fairness, it was addressed last night, but the question was, without a full Memorial Day parade this year, but we expended the full $1,500 in that line.
How does that work?
It was brought to my attention that nearly all of the flags that line 3A for Memorial Day needed replacing, as well as the actual ropes on the flag poles, which are somewhat costly to
That makes
do.
sense.
And that's the balance of that account.
Yeah, we also did all the wreaths and
In the
whatnot.
wreaths at the cemetery, yes, thank you. And the town wreath, yep. Okay. Any questions for Mr. Leary before we move into kind of the budget process? Okay, hearing none. So I'm going to share my screen.
Did you do school business?
That's after.
That's after.
Oh, sorry.
We'll go through town first.
I was looking at the other side.
You too excited?
Right, and so the town, Mr. Town Administrator Brown did share with us the Google Sheet. I know Ms. Douglas asked for a hard copy of the town budget. If anyone else,
I did too.
okay, just send that to me in a note in an email, please.
Oh,
So I have.
I asked Troy.
Oh, you asked Troy?
Yeah,
Okay.
he
There
said
you
he
go.
would get one for me so I could bust out the highlighters. What's that?
Scott, can I need someone to email it to you?
It's
Oh,
a
he'll-
hard copy.
Give him
Yeah,
some.
we'll get Scott a copy. That's we can certainly take care of that. So the town budget, this is very much a draft still. I know the Board of Selectmen have not voted on the final numbers, so what you see here is still very preliminary.
Did you share it? I don't have it. Did
This
you
is
share
your
screen?
live Google Sheet.
Oh.
Yeah. So this is what,
Okay.
He
Mr.
generally
Brown
provides
showed
a
us.
link to it to us. He allows us to.
Yeah, this is the live budget that you guys work with. So currently, at this very moment, the selectmen are proposing a budget that's $273,000 in change over last year's budget. Keeping in mind, though, that $150,000 of that is the communication tower equipment that was voter approved and now is within this budget. All right, so just keep that in mind. So that's representing about just over a 4% increase to take the budget at this moment to $7.338 million.
But even though it was approved last year because it didn't cost anything, it now hits us, right? That's what we're dealing with.
Correct. And because it was approved, it's now rolled into the operating budget. That has a direct impact to our tax cap.
Right.
Okay. Speaking of tax cap, Mr. Brown, our town administrator, is keeping track of our tax cap on a running basis here. And our tax cap at this moment is 136,000 over.
And that's without insurance and whatnot.
This is without a
being-
few things.
Being finalized.
There's a few things here, right? It is certainly without insurance. It's also without a new police contract that's up this year. It's
I love
also
the police, but
it's also without I believe the IT manager's contract is up this year,
I knew what I think about that one.
right? And so there are definitely some question marks still where this is likely to increase based upon health insurance rates and benefits and the police contract,
Yay!
etc. So currently it's 136,000. I do anticipate this going up, as Mr. Leary mentioned. I suspect the board is talking through some ways to get this down, because ultimately we as a budget committee cannot approve, period, a budget that's over the tax cap.
Right.
All right. And if there's any desire to have warrant articles this
Those aren't
year,
included.
we would not be able to recommend warrant articles either.
This is because you said you like these shorter meetings.
Okay.
I'm just teasing.
So certainly, as in years past, right, there's many different tabs here that you can go through if you have access. Again, Mr. Taylor will certainly get this over to you. You can go through the budgets. You can look at kind of the analysis and kind of the year over years per each one of the specific categories within this budget. Okay.
Andrew, what did you say was the amount? Was it 150,000 for the communications?
It's $150,000.
Thank you.
Yes. And that is rolling under, I believe, general government buildings and not the information technology budget.
Okay.
That makes sense. It's got an increase of about 157.
Yeah. Yeah. Right here. So it's under the equipment lease for $150,890. Yep. Okay. So with past years, I know this is going to be a bit of an eye chart for those here in the room. Hopefully it's a little bit more clear for those on the WebEx. I don't know. Let's see if I can enlarge it here. I haven't shared this with the committee yet. It's kind of hot off the press, right? So every year I prepare an Excel file. I look at the actuals. I try and look at a fact-based approach to the numbers. I know Ms. Harrison's shaking her head. She's very familiar with my process. I don't think she likes it.
Well, you're going to have a hard time with the school district.
Well, look,
3-year trend.
I don't know how we do averages this year.
Yeah,
I'll say
exactly.
that, right? I don't know the answer.
It's gonna be all messed up.
Yep.
Yes. And so we're actually seeing that right now, right? And so in column, this is actually current year budgeted for right now, right? In the current budget, in the expense reports, it aligns to what you see here in column E.
Have you shared this with us or
Not yet.
Okay.
Literally, it was just a matter of finishing it up today. I used last Friday's expense report, went through it, analyzed it, and that'll be the foundation for comparing actuals to see how we're doing in terms of the year and what's being requested. All right. Then what I did was, all right, I said on this next tab, I took a copy of it. I said, all right, from a percentage perspective, how are we looking in terms of actual expenses compared to budget, right? And what I found here is that for a lot of these accounts, and if you'll note, these are largely seminars, travel, mileage, expense accounts, supplies accounts, that is a result of the board making the decision early on to tighten the budget and to really reduce spending. So a lot of these accounts don't have any dollars associated to it because they haven't spent it, which means this money remains in our operating budget, right? If I add this up specifically, we're at $155,000, right? Remaining in this year's operating budget that we've already budgeted for last year that has not yet been spent. So certainly, if we talk about tax cap, right, we talk about money this year that could be encumbered and applied to next year. If I look at the total, and this is kind of where it gets a little bit interesting, at least for me, you know, that number, oops, where is it? Did I lose it? It's on this sheet. Yeah. If I look at the total, right, we're at $4.86 million spent at this moment on a $7.06 million budget, which represents 69% of the budget. In reality, let me get this without. In reality, where we are in this time of the month and this time of the year, we should be somewhere around 72 to 73% spent.
Yeah, I guess my question is going to be, how does it relate to past years at this time?
72 to 73%.
So-
that difference of 3 or so percent
Okay.
actually results in what I believe is a savings in this current budget of about $225,000. And the reason for that is on top of the expenses that we haven't spent, we also have a police officer that is serving our country, right? There is also a police officer that left our department,
Mhm.
right? That results in savings in salaries and savings in benefits that you're seeing and it rolled up into some of this number.
Right. Well, sounds like we have some area for our
Are
tower.
will those positions be filled?
The officer that left, they're currently looking for a replacement. The one that's serving will not be filled till he
Hold
comes
it for
back
him.
yet.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's a matter of, yeah, we're not going to anticipate necessarily zeroing down the lines, but recognizing that there are funds that can be used to maybe pay down the radio tower or take a year out of that. Or like we're
Right.
not necessarily eliminating expenses for personnel and whatnot, but here's a creative solution to.
So in addition to this, right? And so this is why, I think from a tax cap perspective, we're going to talk a lot about it, certainly. But right now, in an operating budget perspective, I estimate we're somewhere around $225,000 in the budget today that was budgeted for, not spent, that could be used certainly to offset something for next year. It would need to be encumbered this year for next year.
Mhm.
In addition to that, in terms of state funding, I do believe that we are anticipating more revenue, given the virus and the pandemic, to be somewhere in the $200,000 ballpark to be sent back to the town. So in addition to that, there's additional revenue coming into the town that could also be used to offset tax rate.
Mhm. I just think we have to be careful because we don't want to offset so much that there's a nasty spike in a year. Like, let's use
Agreed.
it for stuff that is
One-time
one-time
expenses.
kind of deals that, yeah. Because we've seen that in the past where we artificially depress it and then people end up getting their escrow bills that jump their mortgage rates ridiculous amounts.
Mhm.
So let's be careful of that.
Did it seem to me in watching the Board of Selectmen meeting that they were looking for one-time expenditures, different ways, trying to be sensitive to just that concern too.
Excellent.
Yep, no, I agree. I think they are looking at this. I think they're thinking about, and Mr. Leary can comment on this, but I think they're thinking about, can we take advantage of purchasing some supplies this year and taking it out of next year's budget? Is there opportunity to buy some, police equipment that they're looking at this year instead of next year? So that drops out of the budget, et cetera.
Because the other thing that is an unknown that we didn't know last year was the impact of increasing all of the exemptions and credits. Because there was expectation, so we should start being able to see what the impact is of that and how that's going to affect our tax rate.
Yes.
Because that offset is potentially substantial. So that'll have an impact also. So, I mean, the filing deadlines are approaching, so they should be able to have an idea. Well, they had them for last year, I would think, so there should be an idea, because there's usually a number carried. I would assume that number would change based on the increase in the values and the requirements.
Mr. Cutter, you mentioned money coming back to the town from the state, and I haven't had a chance to watch the 5.5 hour marathon yet, but was there a conversation around federal funds as well, CARES funds, and how that could potentially impact?
They've applied for just about everything that they can possibly apply for. We haven't heard back yet. Some of the things that they've done in the past have been paid out, but we're still waiting on the final.
I mean, there was a restriction on some of those, right? 'Cause some of them were for like first responder bonuses, and
PPE
we had to pick up like the social security impact of that. And
Yeah.
so there's different costs and
Yes,
savings
correct.
there.
We don't have the final on that yet.
Okay, so I think that's forthcoming, but I do believe that number is somewhere in the $200,000 range.
Okay. And once you guys have your meeting, the library number went up significantly. I was hoping to take a look at that preliminary, but it doesn't seem to be loaded yet.
Yeah, so the library, I do know, I can speak to that. I'm sure Mr. Leary can speak to that as well. The library had an employee this year, and if you note, actually under the executive line,
Mhm.
there's an overage, a
Mhm.
large overage that is kind of explaining this. So they've had
This is,
a position that
it's not coming up on my screen.
they've had an employee in the library take benefits this year that wasn't anticipated. Because of a longstanding agreement between the library and the town. The library didn't have the funds to make that happen, so the town assumed that. They put it under the executive line, which
That's
is
right.
why you see the spike in insurance there.
We had that debate last year.
Next year, it's rolling into their budget,
Yeah, I see that.
Into the library budget.
into the library budget. So the library budget next year is somewhere in the ballpark of 300
I just think of how much has increased in the last 3 years, and it's a little.
301,000. Yeah.
309,
301.
301.
I just see that we went from a budget of 200 and something not too long ago to, and people complain about the increase in like.
I remember when we were below 200.
Well, I'm just saying, people complain about the police and the others,
Yeah.
but there's some other things that we really ought to look at.
it went up 34.5, and of that, nearly 29,000 of that 34.5 is what you're referring to.
Health insurance.
Health insurance.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not that I don't value the library, but when we see everybody tightening our belts and we recognize that this budget's gone up 50% since my time here, that's a little concerning. So,
I can certainly talk to the library when we get down to the capital improvement part of our agenda.
no, I can't say publicly. Go ahead.
So just any questions on kind of the budget, the expenses, kind of the beginning of the review process starting next week? Ms. Forty, Mr. Hayes, Mr. Taylor?
No questions.
So just want to remind folks, to take care to look at what the time is that we start when it's a review versus a vote day.
Yes, thank you. I was going to bring that up as well. So what I have displayed here on the WebEx and on the screen for those in the room, this will be a part of next week's agenda and going forward, right, for the next several weeks. This is the review schedule that the town administrator would like to review the budgets for, right? So next week, there's a whole host of budgets that they're going to take us through: town meeting, town clerk, all the way down to conservation and debt service. And then the following week, we'll get into Parks and Rec. And then the week of the 15th, we'll get into police, etc. Now, the way our budget calendar was scheduled, and as we agreed upon several months ago, the first 3 meetings in October would be review. The final is a 5-week meeting schedule in October. The following 2 meetings would be specifically for town voting. Our review sessions, given a lot of the discussion at the beginning of the season, our review sessions will start at 6:30. Our voting days will start at 7 o'clock to allow for others who might struggle to be here at 6:30 time to get here so that their vote counts.
I appreciate that.
That makes sense too, because if we're deliberating and discussing
Right.
as we go through it, we need more time.
Well, and also we agreed that this committee has a hard stop at 9:30. Right, and so to give ample time for some of these discussions,
Yeah.
about 3 hours was a fair amount of time. to do
Can
that.
you send that over to Troy? The
He's the
hard
one
stop? The hard stop?
Well, it's for everyone except Troy.
Thanks, Andrew.
All right, so next week the fun begins. We have a whole host of accounts to review. The Google Sheets, please feel free to take a look at that. I do believe at this coming Monday's, it would have to be this coming Monday's Board of Selectmen meeting, they will vote to approve the budget and submit it formally to the Budget Committee. In all fairness, in order for me to go through this and kind of do my magic with the data, I might need more than a few days. So I don't know that it'll be ready for next week, but certainly by the following, the week of the 8th.
So in the past, you met with some of the, like, say Troy and the chairman of the Board of Selectmen or the chairman of the school board in advance to express something, to be more in a line before the meeting. Do you intend to do that this time around?
I'd love to. I don't know that I'm going to have time before
Okay.
10/1 to do that.
Gotcha.
Right. And so part of, why I did this initial expense report that I shared with you is just to start to get a view, to start to get a feeling, to start to say, hey, I think there's about 225,000 there in savings. How are you thinking about that? Are you going to do anything with that? Can we use some of that money? Right. So I've already kind of started to have that discussion. Okay. Any questions on the town and the process beginning next week?
I do, but when it comes to what we're allowed to talk about and when we're not, so
Good.
when it comes to like payroll for the town, last year it was, well, it's already negotiated, so you kind of have to vote for it. Well,
Yeah.
I understand like the selectmen, they actually negotiate things for the contracts and like that, but as a budget committee, why do we have to approve it? Such as, one of the things I keep coming back to is pensions. It doesn't make sense. It hasn't made sense for a lot of companies out there. They've gone away from it. They've offered, extra 401k plans because you can't continue to pay pensions off the backs of the citizens. So does that ever get talked to by the selectmen, or why do we have to vote for it if we don't, if the process or the continuation of doing pensions is just going to keep upping the budget and keep putting it back on the citizens? So why do we have to say yes to it when I don't believe in it?
I think unfortunately that there's laws associated with that, and to change away from a pension to a 401k for a government employee may require some action in Concord, because they tried to do that with the teachers union several years ago, and it resulted in a New Hampshire Supreme Court lawsuit based on changing of contracts. So while I may agree or disagree with you philosophically, I'm not saying which way, I just don't know that's something we can address in the budget committee level. It might be a higher level.
And in terms of contract, I mean, what the Board of Selectmen and even the school board agreed to in these documents or in these contracts with the employees, we don't have any say over. Right?
We
So
don't,
really-
but we vote on the budget itself,
We
which
vote on the
it is
number.
a part of the budget. So where we don't have a say when it comes to what they
Mhm.
do or say, we do have a say in actually saying we can afford that or we can't by voting yes or no to each one of those items.
Well, if it's a warrant article, and I believe the police contract would be
Yes.
a warrant article, then, the budget committee makes the recommendation or doesn't,
Right.
they
But you
recommend
don't
it
have
or
to
they don't
support it.
recommend it. So that's,
That's a good place to make your.
No, I'm talking about actually on the town budgets. When it comes to payroll and everything like that, we have to vote on each one of these line items.
Yes.
And to support, I mean, last year was pretty much, you kind of had to support it because it was already done. So,
So I think one thing you could do is possibly put forward a warrant article that says all employment or certain employment agreements have to be put forward for the voter. The problem is, I think that there are laws that our hands are tied by. There's only so much we can do. You can choose to not fund it, and that's absolutely your prerogative. But that just then means that if we're still legally obligated to fund it, that you're going to have to take the funds from somewhere else. So, I mean, we can absolutely direct the chair for additional information from the NHMA, like how legally bound are we to actually fund that regardless of whether or not we support it. But if we suggest that certain things are base minimum, then we
And I
are
can
tied.
share, based upon today, 3 of the members here, including
Mm-hmm.
myself, we listened in on the NHMA budget workshop, and this was sort of addressed,
Mhm.
right? And it was the governing bodies make the decisions on the contracts, and the budget committee is simply a recipient. You can vote for it or not vote for it. That's your prerogative. If you don't agree with the numbers that are in there, don't vote for it.
Okay.
Right? I mean, I
Yeah.
don't really have a better answer for you.
Mhm.
You agree?
I was just getting, that was probably one of the takeaways I had from that workshop today, was whether you're talking about the town side or the school side, though, those governing bodies are the hiring and firing. And I think
Yes.
in that, from a legal perspective, includes the salary portion of it as well. So that was a takeaway from that.
But yeah, you should also research the creation of the pension fund and how it was created. There were certain incentives offered to towns and whatnot to join it. And whether or not that deal has been upheld by the state or whatnot, this is a deal that's gone back since before I was born, which for some of you may not be too long, but it's something you can research, look into. It's just there are legal obligations that we have, regardless of whether there's a lot of things that we fund that I don't agree with, but we're legally obligated to fund.
that's fine.
Okay.
I'm just asking it now because there's plenty of times I brought up stuff and they're like, it's not part of the purview. So I just want to get it out of the way now. And
Make a list and see your state rep and start working on Concord. Because unfortunately, with some of the stuff, that's where we have to make the change.
I don't know, Ms. Forty, anything to add? I know you're kind of connected to this.
One thing I would say is that to also just remind that any resident has the right to go, well, now, join virtually, the Board of Selectmen meeting or the school board meeting, whichever side it's on, and give your input as far as how contracts are negotiated or what is being done that you agree or disagree with, or questions that you have. There's oftentimes on the Board of Selectmen side where there isn't any public input at all. And clearly, people have strong opinions, or at least at the very sense, let's have the conversation, let's ask the questions, and dig deeper in this. And I think this is absolutely a year where we're gonna have to dig deep.
Questions are always good. I always say.
Is there a comment on chat that we need to look at? I see the bubble there.
Let's see. You stop sharing? Chat. No, it's just Mr. Taylor with his email address. Yeah, thank you.
That was an easy one. Like it.
I don't know, anything to add from Mr. Taylor or Mr. Hayes?
I would just say, Mr. Chairman, this is a prime opportunity to go ahead and start to question, the overall budget. So if your hands are tied around a pension fund and things of that nature, as we've seen in the private sector, you run into a situation that, you can't have every great benefit out there. So it needs to be brought up and discussed that if there is no way around the pension option, then there may be another area that has some give and take. Those are the types of discussions that I think have been lacking in the town thus far.
Thank you. Okay, anything further to add before we move forward? Thank you, Mr. Hodgkins, for bringing that up. Okay, shifting gears into school business. Ms. Harrison.
Yeah, so you all got our business administrator's report. I'll just sum that up. School opened on September 9th. We have students learning both in school. We have about roughly 80% of the students in the district are in school, and about 20% are learning remotely at home. Teachers are teaching synchronously, so they're teaching the same class of kids, the 80% who are in the classroom and the 20% are at home at the same time. So there's definitely a learning curve, and we're, troubleshooting as we go, and we appreciate everybody's patience as we kind of figure out what works, what doesn't work, and we streamline the process there. At the special meeting on September 16th, we thank everybody for coming out to vote who did, and voters approved the $667,000 from the state to be deposited into the Capital Improvement Expendable Trust Fund, which comes at a really good time. We're in the process of making extensive repairs to the HVAC systems at all three schools, and finding as we go that there are more fixes needed, more repairs needed, and I'll touch on that in a few. Plus, we started the secure entryway for LMS, which will go kind of as you're looking at the building straight to the middle. So you'll go, as visitors enter, they'll go right to the main office instead of to the gym or the cafeteria. So construction on that started, I believe it was the 11th.
First day of school.
Yeah, it was the first week of school. So that was great timing. And that's underway. We've signed a contract with Dave Ely of Windy Hill Associates to do the plans and to kind of oversee the project. And then the construction is being done by Solid Roots, which is a newer, smaller company. They've done some projects in other municipalities around town, other school districts. So that seems to be running along very smoothly. And
The fifth grader would like to thank you for the excavators.
I bet it's pretty awesome to watch out the
Pretty awesome to
windows. Yeah.
hear it all day.
Yeah, we spent the whole summer with excavators in our backyard, so I've had my fill. So that'll be, the target date is by November 30th, and that's only there's some extra lead time necessary for some of the doors and some of the equipment that we need to finish that off. So the HVAC systems, GMS was an older system. So when concerns related to COVID came up, because it was such an old system, it actually was a very simple mechanical system. So it was easy to kind of, open some dampers and make sure fresh air was being pumped into the classrooms, and exhaust was backing up. So they found lots of problems. They found lots, they opened up the thing where the fan is on the top of the building and there's no fan in there, or it's not, the belt isn't connected. So as they were doing the assessment, they went through and did repairs to get it up and running. So everything is up and running at this point to code. So we were able to open school. In working in CHS, part of the H.L. Turner report was, and I think probably, I don't know if I've said it before in a budget committee meeting, but the control system is what is out of date at the high school. So there were mechanical repairs to be made, it's the main problem is the control system, which means that our maintenance staff has to climb up on the roof and open dampers manually and close valves manually and go up into the ceiling and fix things. So Viking Controls is working on installing and programming the main interface so that can be so that the dampers and everything can be controlled remotely, which will be a huge help for our maintenance staff. LMS HVAC is underway. The system that they're using at the high school, the control system that they're using at the high school, will be compatible with some parts of LMS, but not the whole system. Eventually, that entire system is going to need to be replaced, and so that's where I think the bulk of the 667 is going to head towards those needed HVAC repairs, and then once we get those things done, then CHS and LMS are good to go for HVAC systems.
So regarding that, is the plan to continue with the service contract with the controls? Because honestly, I think that's where we ran into trouble in the past, was by somebody thought it would be good to save a buck by not having a controls, which led to not
So
having controls.
actually what happened with CHS, and I think it was there that we didn't continue with the contract and now we have antiquated, they snipped the wires, right? So in making calls and getting quotes, we actually discovered that one of the people that came in with Dave to assess the HVAC system had worked on CHS and had the plans. So we had been looking for where are the plans, where are the specs, where are the schematics? He had them. So he was able to go in and say, yeah, I built this system. I know it inside and out. So he's the one who's doing the controls.
Right, but I'm saying going forward, will we be seeing like something in the budget for a annual service contract associated with it to make sure that we maintain controls?
I can ask that.
Because we'd hate to find another situation where we think we're going to save a buck and then 10 years later we don't have controls.
Right. That's a good point. I will definitely find that out. Yeah. So that's
Not that I'm trying to inflate your budget, but I'm just saying I want to make sure that we're.
I'll blame it on you,
I'll
Karen.
get to this when we get to the devil.
And then my other question was, I think it's great that passed, but what was the vote? What were the vote totals?
54-14, I believe.
Yeah.
75 people.
Yeah, it was certainly less than 100.
Is that what the?
Yeah, you're about right.
Yeah.
Were you going to ask a question around the CHS piece, the controller?
I was just going to
Yeah.
make a point here on the capital improvement plan, which I'm going to present here in a moment to the budget committee. There is a line item for 2022 for CHS energy efficiency. This is more heating and ventilation. That number is $1.28 million. That includes a complete overhaul of these control mechanisms and
The ones that we're installing now, we're going to
Yep.
overhaul in 2 years.
Yes.
a lot of.
Because of COVID, we've had to kind of put on the fast track a lot of these repairs that we already knew were necessary, but because of COVID and the ventilation questions, then we decided to step in. And
Right. No, so my
address
hope
them now.
would be then that there would be an offset in the 1 point whatever million.
Oh,
because
absolutely,
We
yeah.
will
Once
have
it's
already
done, it's
done some
done.
of the replacements instead of replacing them and
Yeah,
then
but we're
replacing
not-
the replacements.
We're not replacing $1.2 million worth of equipment at CHS right now.
Not right now,
Right.
no.
Right.
But that 667,000 will go a long way to doing what we can.
So with those controllers being replaced, and I believe I heard it was Dr. Jetty or Corey speak to this at one of the last meetings. They literally talked about the manual process that was having to be done.
Yeah.
Is there conversations of the efficiency savings with that and the
Yes.
impact to next year's budget and what that looks like, assuming that we could see some cost savings there, having a more
Right,
efficient
absolutely.
system
And
in
that's part of the, as part of the H.L. Turner report, they pointed out a vast number of inefficiencies in all three of our buildings. So that is part of it. As we're replacing these systems is to make them more streamlined and more efficient. So that's absolutely, there should be cost savings down the road.
Well, in addition to that, you have the benefit of freeing somebody's time up. Like,
Yes,
if they're not
right.
running around the building all day, opening and closing, then
Yep.
some of the other issues associated with an additional janitor
Mhm.
might be alleviated in part because all of a sudden this guy can now focus on his actual job instead of
Right.
air conditioning.
Right. And a lot of this is just stuff that we, the school, we just haven't been able to get after because we haven't had the money or the approval. So now that it's in the capital plan and, hopefully we can get at these things and get our buildings back to
Use it
where they should
wisely.
be. We will.
Anything further for the school?
Oh, I had one more thing on my report. Corey, based on the year-end financials from June, Corey was estimating about a 2 cent per thousand reduction.
Is that an
In-
overall reduction or a reduction to the proposed increase?
The local school tax rate. So that's based on last year's numbers and the end of year spending.
Okay. Well, I just remember last month we had, it's a 13% increase, which is down from 43. So I'm just curious. I was just curious, is that 13 now 12 and that's your 2, or is it actually a -2? So that was my only.
-2. Yeah. And he, that's subject to change, of course, as assessments come in and everything, but he doesn't anticipate a significant change from that estimate.
Right, and we'll have enrollments soon, which will affect some other revenues,
Mhm.
which should be interesting.
Right, yeah, October 1st, we should have the state, the numbers that we report to the state for attendance. Students enrolled.
My only question for the school is, it's been a while since we've received an updated expense report. I may ask.
I noticed he didn't send that out, I think with all of the repairs that we've been doing. I'll make a note to ask Corey for that and make sure that gets sent
Yep,
out.
so we're going to meet weekly for here on out for a while, so he'll have plenty of time to get him and ask him
Plenty
for
of
it.
time.
You have a question?
Yeah, same question for Mr. Leary. CARES funds, is that, has the school district received those? And
We have not yet.
Okay.
So the first round of monies that came out, we ended up receiving about 60,000. And I think about 10 of that went to St. Francis because it was for all schools, for all students. So it was about $50,000. I don't think we have received it yet, but that was kind of our estimate, what we were going to receive. And then there's still, I think, $6 million, whatever amount it was in CARES Act money that's still at the state level.
Mhm.
And we haven't heard anything on where that's going, who's getting it and what for. So we're still waiting on that.
thank you.
Any other questions?
Ms. Harrison, a quick question. Any
Yes.
as far as any insurance money coming for GMS and the power surge?
We
Is
have-
that happening in August?
Good question. We have submitted claims to Primex and are awaiting word on that. We're hoping that they'll count that as not so much an act of God, but as decades old equipment, and hopefully we'll see some revenue from
To be
that.
determined.
Yep, I'll let you know.
So going forward over the next few weeks, right, I know our focus is on town business, just getting the community members' thoughts. I'd like to remove the school from the agenda over the next few weeks so we can specifically focus on.
Do we have a timeline for the school?
We are going to begin the school budget reviews and the joint sessions starting beginning November. So if you recall, we agreed
Right.
months ago to have those.
That's fine. I'm just hoping that we actually get it in advance this year.
Well,
Me
we're not
too.
going to get it in advance because we're going to be reviewing it with them.
I hope we get it in advance.
Can I get it before then so I know what they're talking about at the meeting?
If it isn't,
I'll make
if it
a
isn't
note.
too much for Ms. Harrison, could we get maybe an electronic update as a part of correspondence that just summarizes?
Oh, yeah. Well, we can still send, if you want, I can still send the business administrator's notes and,
Because there's still going to be stuff coming out that has an impact. I mean,
Sure.
the enrollment reports
I'm
gonna have
not
an
saying
impact.
not receive information. I'm just saying for the next 3 weeks.
To not
Right.
discuss it too much.
We'll talk about it again
Yeah.
in a month from now, but over the next 3 weeks.
Oh, okay.
would
You're
that
saying
work if we
yeah.
just
Possibly,
continue to
yeah.
send
Okay.
the budget reports and the expense?
Yes,
sheets?
please.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we'll add this back to the agenda, actually, I guess on our first voting day, which
End
would
of
be the
October.
4th week of October.
Mhm.
Make sense? Is
Yeah.
everyone okay with that?
Mhm.
All right. Anything else for the school before we get into the capital improvement?
Mr. Chair, I just had a question.
Please.
Thinking, I guess, thinking ahead, and I didn't catch it if this was mentioned in the correspondence, but I did see that note from Troy Brown on behalf of the Board of Selectmen about the reduced capacity of the town hall for how many people can be there in person. I believe it's 12 total, and one of which being LCTV's person. So thinking of next week, if we are going to have different department heads and people coming in and out, is the direction going to be that is the will of the committee or the chair's recommendation that we have all the department heads joining us by WebEx and the members are in person, or?
Yes, so the instruction is as follows, right? If you are a committee member, you are welcome to join us in person. If you feel safer via WebEx, by all means, we'll continue with the roll call vote as long as there's even one person via WebEx. That's the standing practice. That's the practice I want to adhere to. If there are presentations by the certain department heads, which I fully anticipate, they will be remote via the WebEx and kind of tunneled in here, channeled in to present to this committee. The only people in this room will be the committee members, Town Administrator Brown, along with LCTV.
I think Karen White will be with Troy.
Yes, thank you. And the Deputy Town Administrator will be sitting in this year's events as well.
Well, based on a quick count, we'll be within numbers, so we'll be fine.
Yeah, we're going to be under.
2, 4, 6, 7.
When they were doing this room layout, as you see, they made sure that they had extra screens for whatever good they do. I don't know. And they made sure that to measure actually the seat placement and layout, so no seats are able to be relocated or moved. We're going to keep them fixed to where they are. And also just by way of practice, obviously, when we close tonight, there were Clorox wipes at the end. We're going to just sanitize our stations and be done with it. Sound good?
Mhm.
Okay. All right, so moving forward into capital improvement, just as a quick and really final update, I think at this point for the next several months to this committee. Let me share my screen here. So if you recall, this board appointed me to the capital improvement committee on the town and Ms. Forty on the school. The work really has pretty much concluded at this point. I know this is a bit of an eye chart. Certainly I have the 32-page deck. I've circulated it to the committee, so you all have this anyways. This is really just a summary of all the capital improvement planning committee projects that were presented to the public yesterday at public hearing. They were also presented to the planning board last week. And the next step here is actually to present to the Board of Selectmen next Monday, in which they will then move to adopt the plan. From there, it'll be a quarterly meeting cycle aligned to January, April, etc. The idea behind that meeting cycle is that this becomes a fluid document and a living document. In January, we'll have a good understanding, certainly, of what the warrant articles are and how that impacts this. In April, we'll have certainly the record of any warrants that passed or failed and how it impacts the plan, and we can adjust it accordingly.
So it's not going to be a global, please accept our entire thing, right? It's
No.
going to be, these are the however many elements we want input on each one of them. Because there's certain things in here, I'm like, oh, sure, great. And there's other, I'm like, yeah. So I want to make sure that if I vote yes, I'm not voting yes to everything, that's all.
You're not voting anything.
No, when I do vote, or when we vote to recommend, or whatever we're going to do.
Well, the next step is, this is just planning.
Okay.
Everything you see here is just on a plan.
Yeah,
It's on a
I
document.
just-
Whatever makes it ultimately to the school board for final vote, whatever makes it to the Board of Selectmen for final vote may be completely different than what you see
Okay.
here. They would vote first, then it would come to our committee. It could be a piece of this, it could be all of this. We don't know.
Okay.
We don't know. All right, so really this is the 6-year plan, which is per today. We heard this today. It's actually the minimum that a capital improvement, it's really the recommended length of time for a capital improvement plan is 6 years, which is what we've instilled here.
But so I had a question on that. Since so much of this cost goes beyond 6 years, why did we limit ourselves to 6?
Because with the last capital improvement plan that happened several years ago,
Mhm.
it wasn't treated as a living document.
Okay.
It became fixed as of a point in time, and therefore it became stale. We don't want that to happen, right? All of these department heads came forth in front of our committee. They presented real life, concerns and issues to the committee, and all, justified in their own right to present, right? That was their ask. And so, if you look back at the plan from several years ago, you'll note that the urgent priority on that plan was a new elementary school. Fast forward to today, it's still on the
Really
plan
urgent.
and still urgent.
Right. So I think my bigger concern is that, all right, so I guess the first question would be, are there any items on this that we would anticipate putting forward after the 6 years? Because if not, all costs then in the first 6 years actually extend much further, which is why I was concerned about the lack of further in your plan.
And so the last column on this sheet is balance to be paid by town beyond year 6.
Right, but all of that's committed in the first 6 years, unless there are any projects that would be anticipated to be approved in, say, year 7.
I mean, what we're doing here is playing the guess game. I have no idea what on this plan is going to be approved.
No, I understand. So my concern here is, okay, so yes, we say balance to be paid in year 7 plus. But if we approve it in, say, year 6, we know that we are already on the hook for a significant amount of money.
Yes.
But it's all going to be lump summed in the final column instead of spread out. Whereas some of these are 15-year items. So we
It would have to be
know,
adjusted. The plan would have to be updated.
I know, but I see the two totals, it gets me nervous. Whereas if it were spread out a little more, I don't see 19 million in years beyond. I'd see, well, 2 million for the next 10 years or something.
Well, you will when it's on the warrant.
Correct.
Yeah.
This is just the plan.
It's the plan.
I'm incredibly thankful for the warrant process. So go ahead. Please proceed.
And also, I'd just remind everyone that there's a tax cap in town. And that tax cap currently is $175,000. Any warrant articles, at least on the town side, that we recommend as a budget committee would need to go through the tax cap process. Otherwise, as a budget committee, we can't recommend it. That's including things like the fire apparatus. It's including things like you see here for a backhoe and for new plow trucks.
Well, and part of the reason for having, my understanding for having the capital plan is, at least from the school side, for example, the planning board voted to not collect impact fees for developments going to town anymore to direct to GMS because there was no plan to build on, or, because we can only use impact fees for increased enrollment and, population increases. And we can't build on that land and we can't renovate that building anymore. So a few years ago, they decided to stop collecting impact fees. Now that we have something on the capital plan, we can reinstate those impact fees and collect from developers.
Right. Again, my complaint is not at all of a.
Oh, I know.
plan. I've been advocating this since day one.
Yeah.
So my concern is the window's too small is my only thing. So go ahead, but that's the window you chose. So go for it. Go, please.
No, I mean that I'm not gonna read 32 pages to you guys tonight.
But whatever you intend to
If you're
present.
interested in that,
I've already
watch
read
the hearing from last night.
I've read through it. So
Yeah. Was there any public comments, any public input?
There were lots of public comment. And so, I know Ms. Forty joined us. Really, the public comment was all about the themes that we saw as a result of
That
the
was from the
survey
right.
that went out.
Yeah.
And so Mr. Weber and I kind of looked at all those comments. Thank you again for everyone who took the time to fill in the survey. We had 10% of the voting resident population actually complete the survey, which is a huge success in terms of survey results. And there were some themes here, right? So themes absolutely, and we've talked about this as a committee, taxes are getting out of hand, right? That was said time and time again throughout. There was talk about a community center and truly a need for a town common area. That was actually very well supported. There was a lot of support actually for the Conservation Commission and their request for $2 million for land acquisition. There was a lot of feedback on the police department. Too soon. Let's look at alternative ways that cost less money. There was this, Brickyard parking for the soccer field over in Brickyard. There's no parking. That was a concern by a resident. Safety complex, they felt would have been a better idea to expand and build on phase 2 of the fire. There was support for getting an ambulance before any fire apparatus. Library. There was the library came to the Capital Improvement Committee and essentially asked for a new facility to be built for the request of about $3 million, give or take. A lot of the feedback from the town was they like our current library, right? And what can we do to preserve it and maintain it as is? So anyway, we did bucket it in key themes. We thank you again for everyone who submitted their comments. We did review it all. Hopefully we addressed a lot of this last night. Yeah.
And one thing that surprised me was that it was reported there was a lot of support, and a lot of people ranked even highest the road replacement, the highway,
Yes.
the plan for the roads.
So the 400,000 that we have budgeted annually for road repair, 200 from the block grant, 200 typically in past years for the warrant article. There was a lot of support for continuing that and maintaining our infrastructure. So with that, this is going to be presented to the Board of Selectmen on Monday evening. for adoption, and then we'll continue it quarterly from there. Any questions?
Yeah, I do. What does that mean by presented to the town or to the board of selectmen for adoption? Means they're going to actually try to pass all that?
No, it means they accept the plan as written, right? And then the board will essentially say, what are we going to put forward on warrant, which will go to the voters for approval based upon what's in the plan, right? So they'll look at, or they'll at least consider, if I go back to the master slide here, where is it? Here, right? They'll look at everything for 2021, and maybe they'll make a warrant article for this coming year for another 200,000 for the highway, for the roads, right? As we've seen in years past. Maybe we'll see a warrant article for a backhoe. Maybe we'll see a warrant article for a plow truck and for a fire apparatus, right? They're going to make decisions on what to put forth on warrant article based upon what's in this plan and also what we can afford from a tax cap perspective. We may not see any of it.
I'm not seeing anything.
So all they're doing on Monday night is accepting the plan as designed and as written, and then down the road, they'll make decisions about what is actually going to be put forth in a warrant to the voters.
Just happy to have a plan. It's good to have a plan.
Good to have a plan. Although the plan is very expensive.
We'll keep it in the library. My grandfather helped build that.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Did a lot of the masonry work.
That's a fun fact. I didn't know that. Does he have the documents from Aaron Cutler himself? Expresses the
I
interest.
think we have pictures somewhere.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. So with that, I believe that concludes tonight's meeting. I'll turn it over to public input. Mr. Brunel, anybody from the public join? All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. We will close public input, and that will conclude tonight.
But there's no member. I don't have any member input, but
Oh, I'm sorry.
it's all right. I used to forget that all the
I didn't
time.
have member input on the. Oh, I did have member input. Member input on the agenda. Yes.
That's
Any
because
other
we were too
member
busy
input?
chatting. No, but
I think we're good. So next week, again, we'll meet on Thursday, October 1st at 6:30 for the review process. We'll review again. The accounts will be listed in next week's agenda, so you'll all have it. You all have the Google Sheets. Mr. Taylor, I'll sync up with you afterwards and make sure you're up to speed. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
so made.
Motion by
Second.
Ms. Douglas. Second by Mrs. Harrison.
Oh,
Mr. Sun.
Yay.
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 Mr. Leary. Sergeants.
Yay.
Ms. Forty.
Yep.
And Mr. Hayes. We are adjourned 7:00. See you next week. Thank you for joining.